This week on the Orange Box podcast, we talk all about the PS5 Pro reveal and pricing, Ubisoft shareholders demanding a change in leadership, the confirmation of the next Metal Gear Solid collection, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 49. I am your host, the man who is currently seeking out a second job so he can afford to buy a PlayStation 5 Pro with a stand and a disc drive, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who, in honor of the late James Earl Jones, will spend the duration of this episode speaking in his voice, Justin, better known as I Am Zaracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
It's been relatively good, I'd say. In fact, last Saturday, I had a completely free day, which I haven't had one of those in such a long time, where I didn't actually have to do anything, whether it's just help out with something, whether it's, go grocery shopping, whether it's doing some sort of chore around the house. It's just it was completely blank day, so that was great. I partially wish that I had prepared for that, because I know I've wanted to do another Lord of the Rings trilogy marathon, but I'll just push that off. I just push that off until my next free day and do it then. But yeah, that was a good day just to relax, to get some gaming in, which of course we'll talk about later on. And yeah, really not too much besides that. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much been it. And everything else though has been not bad. I mean, things were a little bit busier this week at work, but we're halfway through, so that's nothing to complain about there.
Yeah, for sure. On my end, let's see here, Saturday was my wife's birthday, so we went, we were able to drop off the kids starting just after their lunch at my sister's house, and then we went out for lunch and then went to see a movie using gift cards I had gotten from work previously from like Christmas of last year. And it's like one of those nicer theaters that has the recliners in them, and it's just like way more comfortable. It's actually pretty cheap too, surprisingly. The price per ticket was for the matinee was like $9.39 a ticket, which isn't bad at all. I mean, that's like really good. That's way cheaper than otherwise. So it's like, hey, I only used one of the gift cards for that. I mean, we ended up getting some drinks too, but the drinks weren't worth that expensive either. They were actually pretty reasonably priced. So, I mean, granted, they weren't like, the big size drinks or anything. They were just that theater serves does like cocktails and mocktails, and we just did a couple mocktails. My wife wasn't sure which one she wanted, and there was two different ones, so she grabbed one, I grabbed the other that she was interested in, and hers I liked better than mine, and she liked it better too, so I'll just keep that in mind for next time if we use it. Well, we will go there again sometime since we still have that other gift card, but yeah. So yeah, there's that, and trying to think of any other like eventful stuff. We were supposed to have our pest control people come in and do like flea foggers to kill off all the fleas in our house, and that was supposed to happen today, but there was, I think, just kind of like a misunderstanding on my part, because we had originally scheduled it for last week, but then last week I was sick, and so I had canceled the appointment because I just didn't want to deal with that when I was sick. And they were able to reschedule us, but I think they just had to kind of like squeeze us in for today. And so we thought it was supposed to be in the morning because the original appointment was set for the morning, and apparently it wasn't. So we get to like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They still haven't come. I call them up and say, hey, I need to know when this guy's supposed to be coming, so that way I can plan accordingly. Because we have to be out of the house, us and all the animals. So 3 cats plus a dog plus 2 adults and 3 kids. And so we're going to go to my sister's house. But the problem is that that's 3 hours plus whatever time it takes for them to do the initial setup. And I don't know how long that takes. Probably not super long. But we had our discipleship and kids club at the church tonight, so it was just like there was no way it was going to work for them coming at 3 o'clock to make that work. So we just had to reschedule it. Thankfully, next week it's scheduled for Thursday morning. And they said between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. And it's like, okay, that's fine. I can deal with that. I just won't go to the office that day. I've already let my boss know that I need to be home for that. So we got that at least sorted out, but otherwise, not really a whole lot of eventful stuff going on. Got in a good amount of gaming. Got some of my stuff recorded that I needed to record, although I'm probably gonna have to re-record some of it because the video quality is not up to my standards, and so I just haven't quite gotten to that yet. But I'm hoping to at least do some of that recording this weekend. I think I should have time. I'll probably record the stuff for a different comparison that's going to be much shorter and easier, and then try to re-record some of the other stuff that I need to record. So anyway, yeah, I think that's it. So what have you been playing this past week?
Well, this is going to be pretty straightforward. I've been playing Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories. In fact, that has been the only thing that I've been playing this past week. And man, when I last played last time, I knew that I was going to be facing Riku soon, but I didn't realize that I would be facing him immediately after I left the world that I was in. So I went and I fought him, and I realized, okay, this is the first boss fight for the first time you face him. And I said, okay, no, I remember dealing with him on the Game Boy Advance version. It shouldn't be too hard. I got mopped. I had to rearrange my deck some and change it a bit before I could actually beat him that time. It took me about 3 attempts, and so after that I was like, all right, cool. So then I kept playing some more, went through the next world. I forgot that he comes again immediately after you face the next world. So because of that, I was like, okay, I'm not necessarily prepared for this, but I'll give it another shot. I also forgot that he can start to use slights now. Granted, he wasn't using the one that I was terrified of, and that's something I'll discuss later on. And so he definitely gave me a hard time. It took me another couple attempts to beat him, but I got it done. And then I was like, all right, cool, I should be good. I should be done now for right now. And then I go on, keep playing through the game because you're still going through the story. And because I'm right now, like before last week, I was probably about halfway through the game. Now I'm pretty much in the last, on the last floor of the game. So I'm pretty much at the end of the game. So I went, and then you face another organization member, Vexen, and I faced his first fight. I was like, okay, I know that this is gonna be a bit difficult, but I got through that. But then when I got to a second boss fight, that gave me a bit of grief, and it took me about 5 times to beat him. I also had to level up some, just because I need to have more card points, so that way I could, have more cards, especially ones with higher values, which, require more card points. And then I eventually beat him. I went through, finished that, and then I got to Destiny Island, because that's the second to last world that you visit before you reach the final floor. And then I went and I fought Riku one last time, and it was not fun at all. It was not fun. And I was very... I almost rage quit at one point too, just because of how difficult it was. And I definitely spent more time grinding just because I wanted to fully max out my health and also again raise my card points up some more. And also the clip that I sent you with the Riku fight, that was actually from the first boss fight. So
Okay.
it definitely got progressively harder after that point. But then after that, after the fight was over, I actually finished it. Then I thought, you know what, something's not happening right now. There's no cutscene because it just takes you out to the general area. And so I said, let me quickly go back to the last save point and save the game just in case something happens when I talk to Riku.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did that because after that, after you go talk to him, you get sent into another boss fight against Larxene, which is why I sent you the other clip as
Gotcha.
well. And I'm definitely glad I saved, because if I did not save from that point, I would have had to face Riku again before I fought Larxene. And
Oh man.
I would have been very upset about that because
Yeah.
she also... the problem with her is just the fact that she can break your card, and then she'll just, instead of just doing one hit, she can unleash a string of maybe 3 or 4 hits before you can actually have an attempt to break the card that she's using, which made things more difficult than it should have been. And it took me about maybe 6 or 7 attempts before I beat her, just because of that. And I mean, it felt so good to finally beat her.
Yeah.
A, because she's difficult. B, her character is just so mean. And I mean, personally, I already knew she was mean enough in the Game Boy Advance version, but when you actually play the remake version and she has actual voiceover dialogue, then she just you really just went to smack her with your Keyblade at that point, just because of how rude she is. But yeah, I went through that and I made it finally to, like I said, I'm on the final floor of Castle Oblivion, and at this point I'm pretty much just trying to get everything else I need to before I face the final boss, just because of the fact that, I mean, granted, I'll have to come back later on because there are certain things you can unlock, but only after you play Riku's story. But I want to get everything else out of the way first, so that way it's just go pull up the game, the save file, grab the couple of items, get the achievement I need. But I have one problem right now where there's another reward room that I'm trying to get into, and you need to have like an equivalent of 30 a value of 30 red cards. You need to have, I think, like 15 or 20 valued blue cards. You need to have, I think, 20 valued green cards. Unfortunately, I got rid of most of my green cards because I did not need them, and I wanted to make space for other types of cards, like specifically red cards. So I didn't know I would need that. I would need any green cards. So I went there and I realized, oh wait, I don't have any green cards. At least I don't have enough green cards. And so I realized I'm going to have to possibly grind or leave this floor to go to another floor that might have green cards. But if I do that, all of the progress I've made on this floor so far gets erased, and I have to go through all these different rooms again. So I'm going to try to grind it out on that point, and hopefully not do that, because I'll leave the floor, but only when I feel like I really want to, in that regards. But yeah, I'm at the end of the game now, and by the time we meet again next week, I should have cleared the game, or at least Sora's story. And I'll probably start up Riku's afterwards, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice. Yeah. You know, it's funny. It's sort of a spoiler, but not really, because they haven't explained it yet. So, I mean, and you'll probably forget this by the time you actually get to that point in the story, considering, how many million Kingdom Hearts games there are. But both her character and Marluxia, who's, if I remember correctly, the final boss for Chain of Memories, for Sora. They have like different versions of themselves that were Keyblade masters. I don't know.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you how that works exactly. Because it's not, they don't have the same names. They don't have their organization 13 names because they don't have like X's in their names.
Right, because it should be their original people, right?
Right. But like how all that works is something I don't know. Because the other thing is like, this is, well, once again, this is like not exactly a spoiler because because I still don't understand the full connection. But of course, I mean, Roxas, you have, who's supposed to be like the nobody for Sora.
Mhm.
And then but then you have Birth by Sleep, where you have the character Ventus, who looks exactly like Roxas. And you have no idea what that connection is. I still don't know what that connection is. Like, there's no clarity in that from that standpoint, because it's exactly the same character model. And I know that Nomura did that on purpose, and that there will be some sort of explanation. But in the mobile games, you have both. Well, you have characters that are clearly later become Organization 13 members at some point in some way, however that works. We don't know the if the Organization 13 members versions are just their nobodies, or if there's something else to them. What exactly happens to the original characters? I don't know. It's complicated, but it's one of the things that kept me more like, interested in checking out those mobile game cutscenes, apart from the fact that I just know that it's going to be important to the story in some way or another. But yeah, it's just, Kingdom Hearts is convoluted as all get out. That's all there is to it.
Quick question, just
Mm-hmm.
because I remember seeing this in the trailer, or one of the trailers for Kingdom Hearts 3, and it really got me wondering, especially considering what happened at the end of Dream Drop Distance. Did it
Mm-hmm.
explain why Larxene and Marluxia were in the new organization? Because
I don't quite understand how any of that works.
I thought they were sort of excluded from being members because of the fact that they were betraying the organization, and that's something
Yeah,
that Zemnis
I
said.
I
Like,
don't know. All of this it's confusing. Because it's like you have Zemnis, you have um what's his face, Xehanort, of course, who's the old man, and then you have like young Xehanort, which I won't even get into how that happens. um and then you have an, another Ansem, like not the Ansem the Wise, but like
the Secret of
I,
Darkness one.
something like that. I don't know, but it's basically it's another guy in a black robe, but it's Ansem, and you have him and Zemnis together at the same time, and it's just like all this. It's convoluted. That's all there is to it. It's like, yeah, I'm convinced now Kojima has nothing on Nomura when it comes to something being convoluted, because at least Kojima, his stories still make sense, and you don't have to jump through a bunch of mental hoops in order to understand it. It's still convoluted, but it's not convoluted in the same way, where it's just hard to follow after a while. But anyway, so in terms of what I've been playing, more Dark Souls. No, I'm just kidding. More Dark Souls. No, I'm not going to be talking about Dark Souls this week because I legitimately have not played any Dark Souls, and I'm not planning to for a while. But in terms of general stuff, of course, as I mentioned, I did play Persona 4 Golden to record footage for that. And I'm going to have to probably re-record like the first 45 minutes for the Steam Deck version, because the color balance of everything is off. The one plus side I can say is that I believe now I understand enough about how to use the different camera settings to where I can start getting the picture to look much better, and where you'll be able to get a much more accurate representation of how these games actually look in person versus how they can look a little washed out sometimes when just done with automatic settings through my phone's camera. So I'm probably going to have to re-record like the first 45 minutes of that, because the rest of it actually looks really good. It's just the first part, the white balance is like really off, and it's just overly bright to where the detail is hard to see, and it's like it's not a good representation of how the game actually looks in person. But in terms of Kojima, as I mentioned, I played Death Stranding quite a lot, and I actually finished it. I finished the story. To do the remaining achievements, it's mostly just very grindy stuff, doing lots of deliveries, increasing like the levels with that. But man, that game is so good. And some of these boss fights, well, really, every like actual boss fight, it legitimately just makes me think of some of the best stuff from the Metal Gear Solid games. Like, they're legitimately just so well designed, and it feels like a Metal Gear Solid boss fight, which is incredible because, so many people just say, oh, this game's a walking simulator, and there really is just so much more to it than normal. But yeah, the boss fights were incredible in that game. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The story made sense in the end. I did watch the Death Stranding 2 trailer again after having finished the first game, and they still don't really make much sense because I mean, it's intentionally left to be lots of stuff that's out of context. You don't even though there are some basic concepts that I at least have more of an understanding now than I did before I beat Death Stranding. It's still just like there's so much stuff that is completely new, and like I have some of the background of everything that happened in the first game story. I understand essentially what happened with everything. But the new stuff, it's like, okay, there's just a ton of questions. What's going on with this and this and this and this? And it's very much a situation where I have faith that Kojima can still tell a story that will ultimately make sense of everything. And I'm on board for all of it. Like I know that I can trust that his storytelling is going to be very well done. It's going to make sense in the end, and that the gameplay is going to be top notch, because the gameplay in this game really was absolutely top notch. And I think right now I have like 13 achievements that I need to do, but most of it, like I said, is very grindy stuff that's just going to take a while. I played probably about half on Steam Deck and half on PC for this, just because Steam Deck, of course, it has the convenience factor of, the portability, even though the performance leaves a lot to be desired in general. But then on PC, of course, the performance is excellent, and I have all the settings maxed out, and it's just like fantastic from that standpoint. So, but yeah, I played all that, and I finished it up on, I think it was Sunday night, maybe Saturday. I don't remember. Well, because I finished up the story. It was definitely later than I planned to stay up. It was probably Sunday night that I finished it up. And then I played a bit here and there between Monday and Tuesday, and just did a bit of grinding. But I was kind of in the mood to play something else, partially because like I was listening to a video about Elden Ring Salt, and I was just like, maybe I'll go ahead and try Elden Ring again. But I didn't still have it installed on my Steam Deck. I had actually deleted it a while ago, even though it had been on there for a really long time. And so like I started to download it, but then I thought, well, I do still have Jedi Fallen Order installed. Maybe I'll go ahead and give that a try first, and I'll start downloading Elden Ring in case Fallen Order doesn't grab me. But it did grab me. And so I've actually played quite a lot of it. I mean, like, I don't know exactly how far I am into it in terms of percentage, but I've done like first 3 planets, and I want to say with this game, it is like a Metroidvania Souls-like, basically. Now, in terms of difficulty, at least on normal difficulty, it is not anywhere near as difficult as Dark Souls. It does do similar things. So, let me explain these Souls-like elements. When you die, you do lose any experience that you've received up to that point. And the way it's set up is that it's not like it's a pool on the ground that you go pick up your stuff. It's that you have to just strike the enemy who took you down. So, or if you happen to die to the environment, which is not as easy to do as it is on Dark Souls, because if you fall off into an abyss, you only lose a little bit of health each time. But if you end up losing all of your health, or if you get crushed by an environmental thing, that sort of thing, then you can eventually die if you get hit enough times. And then it'll just leave your experience there on the ground, and then you can go pick it up. But the enemies are nowhere near as difficult in general, even though sometimes they do swarm you quite a bit. The parry window is surprisingly big, at least on normal. I know that it shrinks down depending on, as you go higher in difficulties, and it actually tells you what the parry window is for each one. So there is that from that standpoint. It looks like my gameplay froze. Oh, there it goes. I don't know what happened there, but anyway. I will note for anybody watching the video version that freeze in the gameplay recording, that was not something that happened while I was playing the game. So I don't know what happened with the recording, but it did freeze on the recording. Anyway, so you lose your stuff if you strike the enemy who... you only have to hit the enemy once that killed you, and then you get your experience back and all of that. One thing that is really different that I like quite a lot in terms of the bonfire equivalents, which is basically just like meditation points, is that when you go into it, of course it saves the game, but it doesn't restore your health and respawn the enemies unless you specifically choose to do that. So you can go into this, you can go to the skill tree, and you can unlock additional skills. And if you restore your health and restore all of your Estus Flask equivalents, which are just stim packs, then all the enemies will respawn. Apart from bosses, obviously. But I do like the fact that it has that distinction, because there are definitely times where it's like, okay, I would like to be able to use... in Dark Souls, I would have liked to be able to use a bonfire just so that I have this easy spawn point, but I don't necessarily want to respawn the enemies, especially if I still have plenty of stim packs and I know, like, okay, I can easily move forward, but... Or, in the case of Dark Souls, obviously Estus Flasks. So, that's the main area in which this game is similar to Dark Souls. Definitely the enemies can be really tough at times, but I've never had any enemy... even the most frustrating ones were nowhere near as bad as the Dark Souls ones. Granted, if I was playing on a higher difficulty, I would probably feel differently from that standpoint. But the movement in this game is, of course, significantly better than Dark Souls. Just very smooth. And I understand that's just a difference in the way the games are designed. Dark Souls is intended to be that way, and I think that it's good that it is the way it is because of just that's how the game is. But since you're playing as a Jedi in this game, it's very different, and the movement is just very fluid. The attacks are very fluid. There's none of the, like it takes a while for your dodge or for your attack to connect in terms of the actions and everything. And yeah, so I've gone through, I think I've gone to 3 planets so far, because there's the very first one you go to, which you can do quite a bit initially, although there'll definitely be more as you unlock abilities, because that's the Metroidvania element, is accessing new areas as you unlock abilities. But I did that, and then I did like 2 other planets, and one of those I've only done part of the planet because like I did as much as I could at the time, but I didn't have all the abilities I needed in order to access new areas. So there's quite a bit of that. But like the combat is just really satisfying. It's super satisfying deflecting blaster shots and parrying attacks. And like the parry window, you actually have to parry quite a bit earlier than I would expect to, which is a little weird to get used to. And like I still haven't quite gotten it down with the physical attacks, parrying those perfectly. But like the blaster shots, I can usually parry pretty easily. So that's been pretty cool. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The only like characters I've seen that have been in other Star Wars things so far, there's Saw Gerrera, who was in, I believe, just Rebels, maybe Clone Wars. I know he was in Rogue One, and the character model is based off of the actor who played him in that. Anyway, you can go ahead and talk if you have anything to say. I need to drink something real quick.
Sure. First off, I'm definitely glad that you enjoyed Death Stranding, and also, I'm also glad to hear you say that you went back to see the trailers for Death Stranding 2 and tried to like make some connections between that and the first game. One thing I did have a question is because I remember, at least I'm pretty sure I remember seeing this trailer when it was when the director's cut was originally announced for the PlayStation 5.
Mm-hmm.
And that was was there actually a stealth section that was released as, you know, free DLC? Because I remember seeing, I think the main character was like sneaking around in a box that was a reference to Metal Gear Solid.
Oh yeah,
Was there
I saw
something like that you played?
I have not come across that, but I'm sure it's there somewhere. There's some stuff I still haven't come across yet. Like I know Jeff Keighley it has a cameo as one of the preppers somewhere in the game, but I haven't come across him yet. Like I know I've come across Herman Holst and Edgar Wright, and I can't remember who else, because there's some people that like I definitely recognize, and then others that I'm like, they look familiar, but I don't know who they are. And I think some of them are just, you know, PlayStation bosses and that sort of thing. Definitely no Shuhei Yoshida yet. I don't know if I don't think he's in this one, but yeah, I mean Herman Holst definitely there. Edgar Wright. Like for a while I was like, this looks like Edgar Wright, but I'm not positive, and then I saw it in the credits and like, yeah, it was Edgar Wright. Of course, I mean, you have quite a bit of bigger actors. I mean, obviously you have Norman Reedus, who plays the main character, and then you have Guillermo del Toro, who's one of the side characters, but he's still an important character in the story. I think Kojima's supposed to be somewhere in the game, but I might be wrong. I know he's made cameos in a lot of his games, including Metal Gear Solid 5, in Phantom Pain specifically. He might even be in both Phantom Pain and Ground Zeroes. I know he was in Peace Walker. But anyway, yeah, so there's quite a number of people. I mean, a lot of people, like, I had no idea who they were, and I still don't. Like, they weren't familiar actors or actresses, other than, you know, Troy Baker, obviously, but he's in everything. And he does an amazing job in his villain role. Like, he's just a complete psychopath, and he does such a perfect job. I mean, Troy Baker's got so much talent. That guy is just fantastic. And of course, the fact that he's coming back in the basically Joker makeup for the second game is crazy. But, or actually, no, it's more like Kiss makeup. That's what it reminds me more of, is the Kiss makeup. Anyway, but yeah, I thoroughly enjoy the game. I think that probably what's going to end up happening with the rest of the achievements for Death Stranding is it'll be something that I kind of just play a little bit here and there, just because of the fact that the rest of the stuff really is mostly just making deliveries. And like I'm certain that with enough time and effort, I can definitely get through all that. And I do want to get all the achievements because I do really enjoy the game. But of course, right now I'm just really into Jedi Fallen Order, and it's I do want to mention in terms of performance. So Steam Deck, by default, it has everything set to medium. There's actually no low settings. Medium is the lowest it goes. I ended up bumping up the textures to Epic, which is the highest that you can do, and it didn't have any impact whatsoever on performance. So that was pretty cool. The gameplay that's being displayed here is all PC gameplay, which is most of what I did yesterday. I played a lot on PC, and performance on PC with all settings maxed out at 1080p, 120 FPS frame cap. It goes as high as 120 because that's the cap, and apart from occasional stutters, I think the lowest it gets to is around probably the mid to high 80s. But it's pretty consistent. I mean, it performs very well. Just occasionally there's like weird stutters where the frame rate will tank down into the 40s for like a few seconds, but it's mostly just like when I'm going from one area to another. So,
Okay.
but that's about it for that. I'm really enjoying the game. I'm glad I finally decided to get into it, and of course waiting until after I was done with Dark Souls so that it didn't throw me off with the controls, because the controls are different quite a bit. And I remember when I originally booted up this game on the Steam Deck, right after I got the Steam Deck, I wanted to try customizing the controls to make them feel more like Dark Souls and Elden Ring, but it wasn't really working very well. It would just kind of mess with things a little too much. So ultimately, I'm glad I just ended up sticking with the default controls. But yeah.
And some of the things that you mentioned, I definitely think it's pretty cool that some of those changes to the Dark Souls formula are there. Like I like the being able to visit a bonfire equivalent without necessarily resetting everything.
Right.
I definitely think that's definitely a good thing, because you rarely, if ever, see something like that done in any sort of Souls-like. And I mean, the closest I can think to something like that is this one game called Blue Fire. But I still, even though it's recommended as a Souls-like, I still struggle to call it a Souls-like, because I really find that more like a Zelda-like than anything else.
Yeah.
But it did something similar to like, you could visit the bonfire thing and like not have to worry about enemies respawning. So I do like it that other games are definitely doing that as well. And like you said, it definitely is better that you don't have the same not necessarily clunkiness, but the way the characters move in Dark Souls isn't translated over to that, because I mean, imagine, just like walking around with the stiffness with, like you said, as a Jedi, and you're from what you see in the movies, and then you're just, nope, we're not doing that here. Yeah, definitely glad that you are enjoying that. So you said like you're 3 planets in, so like I guess roughly where would you say that puts as far as the game completion? Like, would you say you're maybe about
no idea
25%? Oh
no, I doubt it. I doubt it, because I mean, none of those planets are 100% completed, since there's areas I just can't access without different abilities. Some of the abilities are Jedi powers, and then others are abilities tied to the little robot that I go around with. So it's like traversal stuff usually, for like being able to instead of going down a zip line, going up the zip line, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, like, I have no idea. I'm not even going to look it up, because I find that typically if I know too much about how much there is left in the game, it ends up detracting from my enjoyment of the game because I'm thinking too much about the end goal. Now, if I start to get to a point where I'm like feeling like it's dragging a little bit or like I'm struggling to stick with it, then I might look it up. But right now, I'm just enjoying myself, so I'm just gonna play. And of course, the Metroidvania elements always keep me interested, and I'm used to the Souls formula enough to where I don't feel like this is bad. Part of me almost considers upping the difficulty just to make it a little closer to Souls in terms of the overall challenge, because I haven't really I with only like maybe the exception of one of the first like little mini, well, not mini, but one of the first hidden bosses you can find. It actually really is the first hidden boss you can find, which I was able to beat after I found a strategy that worked well. But apart from that, there aren't a whole lot of examples where I ever felt like, oh, this is annoyingly unfair. Typically it's just more like, okay, I just have to be a little bit better about how I dodge, try to parry some more attacks. Usually, like parrying, I typically could do it consistently enough with humanoid type enemies to where it's not a big deal. It's some of like the bigger monsters and that sort of thing where I'm like, okay, I don't know if I can actually parry their attacks, and so I'm just trying to dodge them, block where I can, and use force powers as I'm able to, and all that.
So I do have a question about something you said. So you actually can change the difficulty without restarting the game?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can change the difficulty at any time. I don't know. There might be like a point where there might be certain difficulties it might be like the highest difficulty. If you change it to that it locks the game at that difficulty. But I don't think so. I'm pretty sure this one is very flexible from that standpoint. I'm not going to change. If I was going to change the difficulty, it would only be increasing it. I would not go down, because I don't feel like it's challenging enough to where I feel in any way like I'm struggling with it. I think normal is a good difficulty, and that I probably could have started at a higher difficulty and would have been okay. But yeah. That's all I got. So, any other thoughts?
No, sir.
All right, well, let's talk about the news. Now, I think we should probably save the PS5 Pro Talk for the last thing we talk about, because that's probably going to be the bulk of what we talk about. So let's kind of knock out some of these smaller stories first. First of all, the all-digital future, even on PC sometimes, is not great. And one such example of this is itch.io, which is primarily, from my understanding, is basically a launcher that is focused mostly on indie games. They have just announced that one of the games in their service, that is Oxenfree, is going to be delisted, and if you do not have it downloaded, it will be completely removed from your library. So you have to have it downloaded and installed, and if you do not, you will not have your license anymore for it. You will not be able to play it ever again. It will just be gone. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely a very it's a very weird situation here, because I do actually want to say that itch.io isn't a launch. It's not necessarily a launcher, because it's really just mainly a storefront for
Gotcha.
buying digital
yeah,
games.
that's what I meant. But yes, thank you.
But it's definitely weird. And granted, I haven't purchased any games from itch.io before. I've gotten games from there that were available for free, and also like certain projects, like because there were definitely some sort of like fan projects, but also other stuff that were sort of more like demos before the full games came out. So I'm a bit conflicted. Granted, Yeah, like I guess the main thing I will say though is the main thing I'm actually disappointed about the fact is that if you actually buy games that you lose access to them, because I mean,
Right.
if there are certain things that were put out there like smaller, I guess, sort of fan made projects like I think Bloodborne, the Bloodborne version was posted on itch.io. Um, like if that got removed, I mean, technically you didn't buy it, and it's not in any sort of like. I'm not certain how that would count as a library if it's a free sort of fan project or something like that. How that would.
Right.
I can understand not having that, but if you actually spent money on a game, you should have access to that game to download infinitely.
Right.
Like there's no reason why you should lose access to that. And I mean, I've heard, I mean, definitely on the thing you sent, like reasoning is possibly because of something with Netflix, but I really don't understand why Oxenfree is only getting removed from itch.io when it's still going to be available on Steam and GOG, which like I feel like the bigger sort of competitors, you would try to get removed. Not that I want them to remove it from those stores, but I'm like, Epic's done that with games before where they removed it for like a major competitor, i.e. Steam. But like, so why is, not that again, I don't want this to happen for the other platforms, but why is it only itch.io that's happening to? And granted, I'm also again wondering like, how is itch.io allowing this to even happen in the first place? Because I feel like, they should allow people who buy games to be able to access them. It's really just messed up. And I mean, again, it definitely is part of that whole digital is still a problem if you cannot actually say that you own it, because you could lose it. And I mean, sadly, this is something that even could happen on other, like, in other stores. Like, for example, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like one of the games that were delisted, like because it was like a 2010s era type of game that was delisted. It accidentally went up on the Steam store. We don't know what happened, but it went up there, and so people were going in there to buy the game because they thought, maybe it's gonna get pulled again, so let's buy it now before that happens. And people who bought the game, later on, Steam removed the game from their libraries. They refunded them the purchase of the games, but they removed them because of the fact that Activision, legally, technically isn't supposed to be able to sell the game because of licensing stuff and whatnot. But, that's still a bit of concerning, the fact that people bought the game and they lost, and it was removed from their libraries. And granted, still, they were refunded because of the fact that, they weren't technically supposed to have the games in the first place, and so they got their money back. But the fact that even though they spent the money, Valve was still able to go into their accounts and delete the games is definitely crazy. And so it's definitely like concerning. I mean, I'm not saying that Valve is going to do this for like every game or it's going to happen before, because Valve, has, for games that have been delisted, if you bought the games, they're in your library pretty much forever.
Right.
Like, I mean, I've got games that were delisted, like Marvel's Avengers, for example, and I still have access to that game. But it's definitely concerning with the fact that if you bought a game and you don't download it, it can be gone forever. And I mean, sure, with itch.io, you get DRM free copies. So if you download it, you can, have it there and you can make backups and stuff. But I don't feel like that's something you should necessarily have to do.
Right.
You should still have that available on your account. And I mean, like, I think that the way Steam, for the most part, minus that one issue that I mentioned before about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and GOG, like, I think the way they handle things is great, because they have had games where they have been pulled off because of the publisher, but they still say, hey, even though these games are being delisted, you still have access to these games. Once you buy it, you can download them whenever you want in the future. And I mean, recently there was a game, I can't remember what it was, but it was being delisted from GOG, and that's the only place you could actually ever legally buy this game, on PC at least. And Warner Brothers was going to delist it, as they have been with stuff recently. And the sad part, I mean, granted, if you buy it there, you're good to go, but it's just this crazy thing with digital where, can you truly say you own it sometimes? I still think that the best way to go is DRM free, because of the fact that you truly can say you own it, because you can make backups, you can copy them, you can put them on discs, you can put them on hard drives, you can do whatever you want. You can make copies and put them on the cloud to download some at some other point in the future. So DRM free definitely, I believe, is the best way to go, but I don't feel like with certain things that you should absolutely be forced to do that in order to actually have access to your games. I think that's just bad on itch.io for allowing this to happen, and I definitely hope that something like this does not happen again in the future, because this pretty much sets a bad precedent for the industry.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, I don't like this. I'm not a fan of ever being in a situation where you have to worry about a digital game just being removed from your library. I mean, I agree with you completely. It should always be, you buy the game, you have the license for good. It doesn't matter if, I should say, I can understand to some degree for online only games, even though I still think it sucks. It at least makes more sense. But for a single player indie game, there's no reason to be removing it from people's libraries. It's one thing to delist. I understand that happens. I don't like it, but it's not as bad as when you're delisting and taking it out of people's libraries who already paid for the game. Especially if, for example, someone happened to buy this game and it's just been sitting in their backlog waiting to be played. If they don't know about this news, they may just find, oh, the game's not there anymore. Granted, it's something that I think goes on sale enough to where they probably could just buy another copy somewhere else, but they'd have to deal with DRM. At least unless they bought it from GOG. So I'm not a fan of this at all. That's actually a game I still haven't played. I do have it on Switch, though. So I don't know. It is what it is. I'm not a fan of when anybody does it. I don't care if it's PC or otherwise. I don't like it when they do that. It's very annoying to me. But obviously there's not really anything we can do about it apart from, I don't know, I guess maybe speaking out about it a bit, but I'm not really sure the exact reason why it's coming down from itch.io specifically and why they're removing it from people's libraries. So, all right, any other thoughts on that?
No, sir.
All right, you want to talk about this Ubisoft story here?
Yeah, so there has been, I don't know why that went down. Pull it up. Okay, here we go. So Ubisoft shares have dropped in recently. They've gone down, and that has pushed investors to try to try to improve management and replace management. So here's a article from PSU, and let's see. It's so let me find the best part. So a letter was sent to the board of Ubisoft, and because of the fact that Outlaws, Star Wars Outlaws, I should say, did not perform as expected, and just because of other doubts that investors have, especially certain, there could be some skepticism on how Assassin's Creed Shadows performs, even though this is expected to be a big seller. There is a call to have I always get his name.
Yves Guillemot, I think is how it's pronounced.
Okay,
something
thank
like
you. That. They want to push him out because they believe that he is not doing a good job with management, and Here's a quote here. The letter calls the current state of Ubisoft mismanaged and that shareholders are hostages of Guillemot family members and Tencent who take advantage of them. And so it also says they want to start a proxy fight. And also, I also did not even know before even reading this article that Tencent had an investment in here, but some people are every day. So they're calling for his resignation, and they also sort of are trying to push to have the company go private as well, or to be bought out by a larger company. But yeah, that is pretty much the main point here, that the shareholders are not happy. And granted, the article does also mention here that it should be noted that all this is not meant to be that the whole reason why that the shareholders are doing this is to help make them more money, and it's not to make the games better. So it definitely also should be mentioned as well. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm going to say that there's a variety of reasons why I believe Ubisoft is having these issues. Now, of course, the issues with Star Wars Outlaws, there's a variety of things. For one, there's just the obviously Sweet Baby influenced stuff within the game, taking what is otherwise a beautiful woman, making her ugly, and they really did just make her ugly, straight up. The fact that it's buggy, the fact that it's very overpriced, the fact that on PS5 there was a bug so severe that it made it so that people who, if they did a certain quest at a certain point in the game, it would literally make it impossible for them to progress. And they would have to restart their game completely. And one of the guys on Married to the Games was actually talking about this because he's been really enjoying the game, and he's playing on PS5. He got about, I think, 10 hours in, and then he couldn't progress. He heard about this bug and couldn't find any way to get past it, so he went ahead and restarted the game. Skipped all the cutscenes, that he had already been through. Kind of just sped through to get back to where he left off. And it happened to him again. Even after this, after 15 hours of gameplay again. So he spent a bunch of time on this and had this happen again, where he couldn't progress in the game. He tried to get a refund, did a bunch of stuff trying to figure it out. Ubisoft basically said that it's not a priority for them to fix this right now, which is just wonderful. It's just great when you have a company that doesn't care about fixing the game that they just released. That some people literally paid $130 to play early. So you have this game with whatever issues it has, even if you takes the Sweet Baby stuff out of the equation, it's buggy, it's broken, it's got severe problems. The fact that you have this progression block after a certain point and everything is just a big issue. Now, I will say that at least in the case of this person, he restarted the game one more time. He skipped past all the cutscenes, and I can't remember. I think it was probably just like a certain side quest that would cause this bug, and that he didn't do that, and he was able to... Oh, you know what? Actually, I think both of the times he played were before he downloaded the update that would fix the problem, or at least that would... Like his save was from... His save was based on the older build, and then I think once he deleted his save, he deleted the game, uninstalled it, deleted his save, deleted the cloud save, and then when he restarted, he was able to get back to that point, I think, in 3 hours of gameplay, because he skipped past all the cutscenes and everything. And, of course, knew exactly what he was doing. So then, And I think he basically like just didn't even touch the side quests. He just went through mainline to get back to where he was, and he hasn't. At least last I heard, as of last week, he hadn't had any more problems. But it doesn't change the fact that this was a broken, buggy game. That it had severe issues, plus other stuff that people just have problems with about the game in general. And that's not to knock on people who enjoy the game. That's fine. You know, you enjoy what you enjoy. There are plenty of games I enjoy that other people don't enjoy. The Sweet Baby stuff, like, it's take it or leave it for me. I certainly would prefer it not being in games, but most of the time it doesn't bother me as much as it does people who like make the specifically like the outrage YouTube videos and all that. But it's still releasing this stuff that's an incomplete game, charging a lot more money for it, and just wondering, well, why aren't people buying this game? Well, I think you know why. It's like, release a complete game, make sure you do bug tests so that this kind of stuff doesn't come up. And yeah, I'm sure it's a big enough game to where sometimes it's not easy to catch those tests, but the fact that this was a widespread enough problem to where they had to address it, that's still pretty significant. And Assassin's Creed Shadows, it's probably going to do relatively well, but there's still plenty of people who are not buying it for various reasons. Personally, I'm just not sure if it's going to be good enough to make it worthwhile. And with the way that they've been with these larger Assassin's Creed games, the way I've gotten so burnt out on Odyssey and I'm not even actually done with it, it's really hard for me to be interested in playing something like that from day one, when I could just wait and then eventually get it for dirt cheap or maybe even free if I wait long enough. Now, the interesting thing about all this is, yeah, of course the shareholders, they're more concerned with making money and not Ubisoft being a better game studio. But the two can very much go hand in hand. Because one of the reasons why they're losing money is because they're not putting out as high quality of work. Yeah, their games look really pretty in general, you know, the protagonist of Star Wars Outlaws aside, but they're still releasing games that are bloated and or incomplete, and then charging way too much for it, and people just don't want to buy it. Plus, of course, there's also various other issues like taking games offline after a short period of time and basically making it impossible for people to play them anymore because they don't have an offline mode. And there's just a variety of issues, but they can definitely make more money if they make better quality games and if they listen to their customers, particularly those who are vocal. And yeah, the rage bait YouTubers, while I would say in general I don't line up with them, I do think that if they were to listen more to these types of people, they would have less issues where people don't want to buy a game because of the type of elements you put in there that people don't like. And they just stuck to making a quality game. Plain and simple. But that's about all I have to say. So, take it away.
Yeah, as you said, Star Wars Outlaws had a lot of different things going against it, and, you know, it's definitely funny considering the fact that Ubisoft said that this is quadruple A gaming, and yet you've got game-breaking bugs, and also, you know, it's also another thing that I also wanted to you mention. It's the fact that, well, they actually did have people to test out the game. It's called people who bought early access, which I think is a very sad thing these days, where that these companies don't have game testers, because they leave that up to the people who buy the game in early access to say, like, yeah, we don't need people to test the game. That's what you guys are for. Like, and in fact, you know what? You get to test the game, and you get the privilege of paying us to do that. Like, yeah, that is, yeah, that I really just am not a fan of. But Ubisoft definitely shot themselves in the foot, like, with all of these decisions. I feel like they definitely could right the course. Like I definitely feel like
Mm-mm.
they could definitely make a comeback. I mean, people for one thing have said they wanted a Splinter Cell game.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, I no, they didn't. I'm sorry. It was just I'll say I thought they actually had a teaser or something, but no, that was just some Sam Fisher clip that was talking about I think Metal Gear because like that was because Kojima left or something like that. But yeah, people have wanted a um people have wanted a Splinter Cell game, and you know they did say they did announce, and you know they are making a Sands of Time, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake, but you know there could be some. I definitely think that because of the delays and also the fact that the studio developers changed, because originally I can't remember, it was the studio that was located in India, and then development like froze or was like not progressing to how the main Ubisoft studio was happy with, so they switched developers. So I think that possibly also put some skepticism into the shareholders' minds as far as like how is Ubisoft handling things. But like you said, if Ubisoft puts out quality products and people buy those quality products, then that means that investors get more money. So they can those interests can go hand in hand. However, so although I do feel like sometimes those interests don't always align, because the companies will do something like, hey, let's instead of putting out a full single player experience, let's push out a free to play game with microtransactions, loot boxes, and battle passes, so we can just get a steady income. So that way, you know, that pleases our shareholders, because hey, we're getting this steady revenue coming in, guys, because we have this free to play game, instead of putting out just like this single player experience that people can buy and enjoy and replay over and over again. Let's just do this instead. But I think that when done right, the interests between gamers and shareholders can align. But I think just in general, because we don't always align, I tend to push against shareholders.
Yeah.
Because our interests are not mutual. But like you said, if they can be mutual sometimes, and if they can be, then go for it.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Any other thoughts on that topic before we move on?
No, sir.
Well, as you mentioned, Metal Gear, Konami has said, well, they've confirmed now that the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection is, in fact, getting a Volume 2. I mean, it's been hinted multiple times before. It was pretty obvious that was going to happen. They haven't revealed what's going to be in it, but they have said that their intent is to release it in a better state than the first collection at launch. Because obviously there was a lot of issues with it. It just didn't... the games were buggy and they were just not in optimal state. But they're trying to figure out what specifically to do with all these games, particularly since based on information that was found within the files of the first Master Collection, this next collection will likely have Metal Gear Solid 4, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and Metal Gear Solid 5, which would be a crazy combination, because those are three great games. At least Peace Walker, as long as they do the HD remaster that's actually at 60 frames per second rather than the 20 frames per second of the PSP version. But I mean, 4 has been trapped on the PS3 for like 15 years. 15 or 16 years. And so that's still the only place you can play it other than emulating it on PC. And I played 4 and Peace Walker for the first time last year. 5 I started last year and then finished this year. And yeah, anyway, before I get more into my thoughts, even though I've already kind of touched on them, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely nice that they're having essentially a full confirmation, and I definitely do hope they do stick or at least they do the best they can with making the quality of the launch much better than the
Mhm.
first volume, because that was pretty sad. In fact, did they ever actually make changes where the where Metal Gear Solid 1 wasn't like 30 frames per second? Or
No, they left it at 30 intentionally. I mean, I consider it laziness, but at the same time, they've also said they wanted to preserve the original experience as much as possible, which I guess I can respect that. I don't agree with it. I think it's better at 60, like you can play it on Duck Station 60 in widescreen in HD, but because it's not even HD, it's still standard def.
okay. But I also it definitely would be good if they can get Metal Gear Solid 4 definitely ported over, since, as you mentioned, it's been only available on the PS3 for years, over a decade at this point, and
Yeah.
it's definitely been a long time to have that ported over to other platforms at this point. And I mean, hopefully it definitely comes out, and hopefully it won't take too long. Hopefully maybe we could get this collection maybe sometime around mid next year. I would hope. But just definitely hope that they put some better quality control in it this time around, which is kind of in a sense kind of sad, because they put in so much care into from what I can tell, the Castlevania collections, and so the
Mm,
fact that they didn't do such a good job. Granted, the Castlevania games are all 2D, so it's kind of hard
right.
to mess that up. But at the same time,
Yeah.
there was more quality control with handling those games, and you would kind of expect them to put in as much quality control into these games, because even if they, at least the volume 1, even if they aren't 2D games, they're still old enough games that you shouldn't have had the issues that we had with them. So hopefully they get it better route this time around. It'll definitely be good to see what happens.
Yeah. So I've made it no secret, for anyone who's actually listened to the podcast, that I am a huge fan of the Metal Gear Solid games.
Gasp.
Even though I played most of them for the first time last year, and um, Metal Gear Solid 4, it was the only Metal Gear Solid game I could not play on a portable device, which pained me. I mean, like, I thought about trying to emulate it on PC because I could, and I could probably get better performance and everything, but I ultimately decided to just play it on my PS3 because I had the PS3, I had the copy of it, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's not one of my favorite Metal Gears, but it's still really good, and I want to see that one ported over to other platforms, especially because getting a proper port, as long as it's done well, we could get what the game deserves. Because even though it's certainly not a perfect game, it's got plenty of flaws, there's plenty of valid complaints about it, it's still a good game. It's still a really, for lack of a better word, solid game. And it just deserves to be on other platforms. Then, of course, Peace Walker, at least, I mean, I enjoyed it even in spite of the low PSP frame rate of 20 FPS. When I booted up the PS3 version on my Steam Deck and got 60, I was like, oh my goodness, I was just completely blown away by it. And of course, being able to have gyro aiming on top of that made it even better, but I didn't play very much of it. I just tested it out. So, but seeing that one brought over would be great, because that game really was held back by the PSP so much. And I mean, it was good for what they were able to do with it, and the game itself was very good. It was a very good game, in spite of the limitations of the PSP. But it's so much better in HD at 60 frames per second. it just, and of course having that second stick, having a proper aiming with the second stick where it's fully analog instead of having to kind of Frankenstein it to make it sort of work like what I did when I played it on Vita. It would just be really helpful. And then of course 5. I mean, Phantom Pain. Ground Zeroes is great too. It's just very short. But Phantom Pain, man, that game is just... It is one of my favorite games. Without question. One of my favorite games of all time. You know, it's a problem because, like, I'm not sure if I can do a top 5 favorite games anymore, because I feel like Phantom Pain needs to be in there. Snake Eater needs to be in there. But then also, I think Dark Souls Remastered is in my list.
Wow.
I'm just not sure where it is. I mean, like, I don't think it's my top 5 necessarily, but it's so hard because there's just so many amazing games that it's so hard to narrow it down that much. Like, my top 2 hasn't changed in a really long time, but I'm not entirely sure. I think both of those games, I think those 3 games that I just mentioned probably could all make it into my top 10. But it's hard to say because, like, especially with Dark Souls, I need, like, more time away from it before I can fully say where I'm at with that. And then eventually I have to play 3 so that I can say for sure if Dark Souls 1 is going to be better to me than 3, because everybody says 3 is better. And I'm sure that they're right. So at this point, it's just waiting to see what happens with all of that. But going back to this Metal Gear collection, it is going to be... I'm mostly curious about, apart from how they're going to properly optimize Metal Gear Solid 4, because that was a PS3 exclusive. It's also wondering how they're going to keep the collection a decent size without it being ridiculous. Because yeah, Peace Walker's not going to be huge. 4 is pretty big. I want to say that's like 35 gigs. I mean, it's small compared to other things. But of course, if they add 4K textures and that sort of thing, that's going to bump up the file size. You have Phantom Pain and Ground Zeroes, which together make up Metal Gear Solid V. Those ones, I want to say between the two, it's probably around like 50-60 gigs by default. I may be remembering wrong on that, but that's without 4K necessarily. And I mean, like, I know those ones are already absurdly well optimized. The fact that they run so perfectly on the Steam Deck and on PCs in general is, I mean, it's probably one of the best optimized games, period. Especially in the past decade. And it's been almost 10 years since it came out. The second one came out too, which is crazy. But yeah, I don't know. I'm curious about what's going to happen with this. The one thing I will say is that probably in terms of the collection, like I'm trying to figure out whether or not I would buy it, because I would want the collection because I love these games, and assuming that, you know, they're well optimized, it'll be worthwhile. But of course, I already have both parts of V. Peace Walker, I'm totally fine with paying for a 60 frames per second HD version instead of just emulating it. And 4, I absolutely am happy to pay for a version that's actually portable, whether it's you're just playing on Steam Deck, or even I'm really curious how it's going to be on Switch. I mean, I don't see any reason why they couldn't get better visuals, or same visuals and better performance on the Switch, or Switch 2, which I guess probably where it would end up being. But I'm anticipating this collection will be next year, probably fall-ish, because that's when they did the Master Collection Volume 1, and supposedly the Snake Eater remake is coming out this year, although they still haven't set a release date. I guess Tokyo Game Show is coming up, so maybe that's when they'll announce the release date for it. But yeah, either way, I'm glad that this is happening. I'm just really curious to see what they're going to do with it, and I'm really glad that they are intending to put out the highest quality versions of this. 4 is the biggest question mark because of just being tied to the PS3. Now, uh, one of the assistant producers did say that they had Metal Gear Solid 4 running beautifully and smoothly on the 360. So that is encouraging because that means that it should run well on other platforms. 360 is much more similar to other platforms than the PS3, where it was the cell processor that was very custom and all that. So, but yeah, I think that's about all I have to say on that topic. More than I expected to.
Yeah, nothing further for me as well.
All right. So before we get into the biggest topic, we have one more Sony-related topic. And that is that Sony is going to be starting soon. I don't think that there's a specific date in mind. Let me look at this again. They're going to be selling refurbished versions of their basic the original PS5 and both the disc and digital versions. They're going to be selling them directly through their store for about $100 cheaper than the official version, than brand new ones. And they're certified refurbished, have like a 12-month warranty on them. And I would definitely feel way more confident in buying something directly from Sony that's refurbished versus like buying it from GameStop or something like that. But, what are your thoughts on this?
I feel like I can't really say too much right now without jumping the gun. But I definitely agree. I guess I will say this is that I agree that buying something refurbished from Sony directly is definitely a whole lot better than getting it refurbished from anywhere else, especially considering the fact that you're going to be parts that, if they have to replace, will be replaced with official Sony parts. So it's not like you're going to get some weird third-party knockoff that may or may not break down within like a few months. Also, they also said that it will come with all the necessary cables, accessories, manuals, and etc. that you would typically use. So that's also something a whole lot better, because most times if you go get something refurbished, you may or may not get everything that you need. And I mean, granted, I don't know what they even do nowadays, because last time I saw an actual manual for something, it was just like 3 pages and didn't include much, and probably was like had some sort of link to actually get a full digital manual. But you definitely can't get that from any other site that sells refurbished products. So the fact that you can pretty much get maybe barring the actual box, you'll be getting a full PS5. So I definitely like that. I'm a bit, I'm a bit though conflicted about whether I feel like $400 for a PS5 refurbished seems kind of fair, considering the fact that we're 4 or 5 years into this generation.
4 years.
4 years. So if it was 150, I would say, that sounds good. But I mean, $150 off, not $150 total. I mean, granted, if it was $150, that would be a steal. But I feel like if they knocked off 150 instead of 100, that would probably be better. But I have something else to say, but I'll save that for the next part of the topic.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good that you'd be able to get it cheaper, especially considering the price of the PS5 Pro, which we'll obviously get to. I still don't think it's necessarily worth that. But for someone who wants to just get a PS5 and doesn't want to get the Pro, and is more limited on their budget, it would probably be, this is one of the better options they have other than just buying a used one, which, depending on where you buy the used one from, may or may not be just as good, if not better. Of course, it could also just be filled with cockroaches, which is something that does happen. Um, but I've seen enough situations where like you could find on Marketplace someone selling their PS5 because it was basically just collecting dust because they stopped using it, or any other console for that matter, Xbox, Switch, etc. Selling it a lot cheaper. So, um, I mean, like you said, the plus of this, of course, if someone decided to buy from PlayStation directly, is that they would be using official parts, all the OEM stuff, and not third party knockoff stuff that half the time doesn't even fit properly, or you have to kind of jam it in to get it to fit properly. So yeah, I guess I don't really have much of any other thoughts on that matter. Just I think it's good that it's an option, but at the same time, I still don't think the PlayStation 5 is worth it. So that's me. That's what I got. All right. You got this?
Yes, sir. All right. So, the other day, Sony revealed, and this is something that we sort of talked about before about a potential PS5 Pro, but has been officially revealed by Sony. They put out a tech video discussing the features and whatnot, but also the price. So the PS5 Pro is going to be 700 USD, 700 American dollars. It's also 700 euros, and I think it's also like offhand it's it's 700 pounds, and I think it's like 750 or 800 euros, and then also 120,000 yen in Japan. So, but yeah, definitely a full $700. Additionally, though, it only is digital, which is something that we talked about before in last week's video about a rumor that it was digital only and wasn't going to actually be physical. Well, it is confirmed now that it is digital only, so there is no disc version. It's just pure digital. However, much, I guess you could say, to our partial relief is the fact that, unlike something we joked about last week, you can buy a disc drive for it, and it will be the same one that the PS5 Slim uses. So you don't have to worry about, I just bought a PS5 Slim and a PS5 drive, and now I have to buy a PS5 Pro and buy a PS5 drive for that. So it is the same one. So you could, pop off the one that you have on your PS Slim and pop it onto your PS5 Pro. You definitely can do that. But also additionally, similar to the PS5 Slim, a stand is not included as well. So that is going to be an extra charge on that. So if you put that all together, you have the $70 console. I'm not $70, $700 console. You have the $80 disc drive, and you have the stand. So that's going to cost you about $800 for this mid-gen console. There also were other aspects that were mentioned that Mike Cerny was talking about, like the fact that, which I also thought was interesting that he mentioned this in the video, was the fact that about 75% of PS5 users that were checked preferred performance mode over fidelity mode. So that is partially impacting what they did with the PS5 and how they wanted to sort of try to get the graphical features of fidelity mode while having the performance mode or having 60 FPS. So they also want to target 4K 60 FPS for games, and also he's said that he is interested in seeing a range of sort of performance modes or quality modes for the PS5 Pro in the future. But yeah, that's pretty much the main gist of things, of course. And talked about certain stuff, like talking about flops, and talking about how the die is 20% 26% larger and stuff like that. But that pretty much is the main focal points. But before I say some stuff, you can definitely go ahead and jump right into it.
Well, first of all, I gotta say I totally called the price.
Yes, you did.
I said it was going to be $700, and I was absolutely correct. And I was not aware that the disk drive was actually was the same one that was in that you could buy for the Slim. So that is a good thing. But yeah, this is it's not worth it at all. This is a garbage price, and this is Sony being extremely arrogant on the front. I mean, at least this time they didn't tell people that they could just get a second job to be able to buy it like they did with the PS3. But it's still just like, this is a ballsy price point. And yes, it is an enthusiast device. Obviously, you're not going to have the average PS5 user going out and buying a PS5 Pro. A lot of people, especially people just who play console in general, are fine with 30 frames per second. They don't mind it being a little more blurry or whatever, and sometimes significantly more blurry, just so that they can have the better performance in the case of people who actually want 60 frames per second. But this price point is just, it's just too high. You know, it's funny, I was chatting with some guys on the Discord, and the Marriage to the Games Discord, about this, and one of them was saying, oh, you know, you can't get a fancy GPU for that price, and I looked it up. I found you could get a used 3080 Ti for about $350, which is a significantly better card than the GPU that's going to be in the PS5 Pro. And it's half the price. And, you know, there's of course the constant argument, you can't build a PC that's equal to the PS5 Pro for that price. I've seen a couple of different YouTube channels, primarily the Salt Miners, who have actually gone through just PC Part Picker and buying new parts. They can build a PC that's about the same as the PS5 Pro, and if not a little bit better, for at most an extra $100. And considering the fact that you don't even get a disk drive with this by default, technically, you actually could build it for cheaper than the PS5 Pro. If a person wants to be able to get the vertical stand and the disk drive, you're not even counting what you pay in taxes, you could build a PC that's just the same, if not better, than the PS5 Pro, and it will play the games better, probably for the most part, and then additionally, will also have all the capabilities of a PC, all the options that are there. Now, on top of that, you have the reality that, I'm sorry, let me back up. The one argument that I think is completely reasonable, and this is, you know, something that some of the guys I've talked to have said, their reason why they do want to get the PS5 Pro over just building a PC in this case is because you still do not have day one PlayStation exclusives, and although we're starting to get trophy support, the fact of the matter is that's only for some of the PlayStation first-party titles. It's not for the other ones. And like, I know one guy who's, you know, single guy, and he plays lots of games. He platinums lots of games. He's, you know, he trophies are his preferred achievement type thing, which nothing wrong with that. I actually like the trophies kind of better than other ones too. But he, you know, as he rightly pointed out, you can't get PlayStation exclusives day one on PC, at least not currently. And that's his main motivating factor. Because, yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, that's fine. I mean, for me, you know, like, I still look at the PlayStation as I think that there are some great first-party games that they make. I like a lot of these games, but my issue still remains that I don't want to buy a separate plastic box that's weaker than my PC that I built 5 years ago, when I could just wait, play other games that I have, because I have a ton of games to play just for a few exclusives. It's like, they may be bangers, they may be great games. Like, I'm a big fan of the recent God of War games. I'm a big fan of various older PlayStation exclusives that haven't had games in a while, like Infamous. I really have enjoyed both Horizon Zero Dawn and what I played of Forbidden West, regardless of what I think about Aloy as a protagonist. Ratchet and Clank is great. Ghost of Tsushima is fantastic. But the reality is that it's not worth it to me to go and buy a PlayStation for those games when I have a PC that can do those things already, and I have more than enough games to play while I wait for those games to come over to PC. So, it's just like definitely a situation where I don't see it as an essential purchase by any stretch. That being said, going further into my things about this price point, the performance improvements that they have, like, they're not necessarily all bad. I mean, I think that, okay, yeah, the 35, it's like 45% better for the GPU performance, and like 20 some odd percent better for CPU performance, something like that. I can't remember the exact figures. Ultimately, it's not all that important. The fact of the matter is that you're essentially, if you bought a PS5, let's just say you didn't buy the Slim, you just bought a base PS5, spent $500 on that. Then you're going to buy the PS5 Pro, and so you want to get the disc drive because you have some physical games you still want to be able to play. So you're going to be spending another $780, plus I think like it's $30 or something like that for the vertical stand, which isn't absolutely necessary because it does have the kickstand probably built in like the Slim does. But a lot of people prefer to have it displayed vertically, so they have to pay that extra purchase. Then you pay for online, which if you're paying for PS Plus, it's like $80 a year minimum for that. Then you're paying typically more for games, because while they do go on sale occasionally, they're not going on sale as often as what you get on PC. You add all those things together, you ultimately are spending way more than you would have spent just building a PC a few years ago and getting decent specs. You could build a better PC today if you're willing to go for used parts, which realistically is completely reasonable, especially considering the fact that so often the reason why people are selling used parts is not because they're not functional, but because they decided to upgrade. And so you could get a really high quality GPU, and the other parts, you could just buy a bunch of used parts or buy a couple of new parts, buy a used GPU, buy a used CPU that are still perfectly good, still work great, and are still way more powerful than what you get with a PS5. And you could spend the same amount or less money in some cases. And even if you spend a little bit more, the amount that you're saving in the long term, you spend way less money. I mean, yes, I definitely spent more building my PC than I would have if I had bought the PlayStation 5 and then the PlayStation 5 Pro. But that's just not counting the cost of online services and that sort of thing. Because I got rid of PS Plus years ago because I ultimately found that it wasn't really worth it for me personally, because the only thing that I really took advantage of with that was being able to have cloud saves, and the fact that cloud saves are behind a paywall is stupid. Nevertheless, I know I'm kind of ranting on and on about this, and I'll give you your chance to talk as well. It's just, this price is too much. There's a lot of people who have had negative reaction to it, but then of course you have fanboys and just enthusiasts in general, and like I'm perfectly fine giving them the benefit of the doubt, because I know plenty of people who are just enthusiasts. They like PlayStation, all that. For them, it's more worth it because they've had to deal with the lower resolutions in order to get the decent frame rates. And now, something I didn't really emphasize before that should definitely be mentioned, now they are getting the better resolution with the targeted 60 frames per second. They didn't say it's guaranteed, which is definitely a red flag. They're not saying a locked 60 frames per second, and whether that's just because they want to cover their bases and all of that, and they don't want to promise something that's not actually coming. It's like they were already saying with the base PS5 that they would be able to get up to 120 frames per second at times. There are almost no games that actually do that on the PS5. And the PS5, in fact, in many cases, the PS5 games are at best, aren't even getting a locked 60 frames per second. They're not doing actual 4K. They're just taking the 1080p image and stretching it out in order to make it 4K, to make it fit a 4K screen without being too blurry. And it's more or less doable because of the fact that they're oftentimes dealing with a 1080p image, which is, half the resolution of typical 4K, which is 3840 by 2160. But the improvements here, it's like, okay, yes, you're getting better visuals, but oh my goodness, the difference is so minimal in the examples they gave. Like, they're showing these examples of, like, for example, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which is a phenomenal looking game. It's a fantastic game all across the board. And he's like showing how the crowd in the background of the opening area, which is one of the only densely populated portions of the game, that there's a little more detail. It's like, now I know that the video's compressed. Watching it on YouTube, the downloaded version of the video that I have playing as we're talking about this is even more compressed, so it's not a good representation of how it actually looked on the original video, let alone what it would look like in person. So I'm not judging it based on the videos that I have or even YouTube. But even looking at the images on their site, the difference is so minimal. It's something you're never going to notice in regular gameplay. The only way you're going to notice is if you stop and just stare at it. It's like, I want to play my games. I'm all for, games looking pretty, that's great. But this ray tracing stuff, like, they're supposed to have better ray tracing with the PS5 Pro. And they're showing things like, better reflections. It's like, okay, yeah, this looks great. But how does it improve my game itself? Like, does it improve my gameplay? No, it doesn't. I don't care if I can see the reflection of my car on the car next to me in Gran Turismo. It doesn't matter. It's not important. And this overemphasis on graphics is what has just been killing gaming and has been killing these consoles, and this PS5 Pro is not worth your money. Now, if you don't have a PS5 and you just absolutely have to have the best possible thing you can and you can't wait for the PS6, then I can understand you wanting to get the PS5 Pro. But if you already have a PS5, I don't think the Pro is worth the extra money. I think you're better off just waiting for the PS6. It'll probably be at like 2027 or something that the PS6 comes out. But just don't waste your money on this, please. Please do yourself a favor. And I know that there are plenty of people I like, people I respect, who are going to be buying this. But I know even some people who are, for all intents and purposes, fanboys that are not buying the PS5 Pro because $700 is just too much. So, all right, I'm done. It's all you. Go for it.
Before I sort of jump into my main topics, I did actually want to piggyback off what you mentioned, because I completely sort of forgot about that, about some of the details they mentioned with the comparisons, is the fact that the clips they showed, like as you mentioned, you're not really going to notice at the time because with the Star Wars clip that they showed, which was talking about like the water reflections, that was in the middle of combat. You're not gonna be focusing on what the water looks like while you're trying to focus on
Right.
parrying. Like you're trying
Yeah.
to make sure that you get your parrying right. You're not trying to look at, huh, the water certainly looks pretty nice today. Like you're not focusing on that. And with Gran Turismo, you're in the middle of a race. You're not trying to see like, oh man, this guy next to me, his reflections aren't right. Man, I'm gonna lose this whole race, because I'm focusing on that. You're not gonna think about it. You're thinking about trying to win the race. So like those comparisons were not great. And also something that I also thought about was the fact that, or at least it seemed to me, was that in the video the comparisons were too quick. It felt like they only showed them for maybe about 1 or 2 seconds before they changed,
Yeah.
because I was trying to actually look at them and see what they were showing, but they were so quick with moving them along that I really didn't have time to properly analyze them as I was seeing them. So I thought that was a bit disappointing. So I also, well, before I guess I'll just quickly knock this out of the way before I get to like something else that I think is more important. So yeah, the price definitely is ridiculous. And as you broke it down, if you spent, what you spent with, if you bought like an original PS5 and then had to buy the PS5 Pro and stuff like that, and then the accessory, or at least the PlayStation Plus, that's definitely a lot of money to spend over the long run. And you definitely could get something a whole lot cheaper if you, just bought PC. But I the thing I definitely feel like that is that this is very, on one hand, hypocritical, but it's also killing one of the reasons why people said a console was great. And it's the price. I mean, a lot of console fanboys said that PC is expensive. You buy a console because you don't want to have to spend a lot of money to get something to play. And the PS5 Pro is doing exactly what the console fanboys were accusing PC of being expensive. Sure, you can, you don't have to buy a PS5, but people said that you have to buy like a high-end PC to get good performance and stuff like that. But you're saying you have to buy a high-end console to get good performance now?
Yeah.
To get enthusiast performance. I mean, like, you didn't have to deal with this a long time ago. If you bought a console, you bought the console, and that was what you had, and that's what you were going to be playing with. You didn't have to think about, man, are we going to get like a good refresh, get improved performance? Because you got the console and you know what you're getting, and you had a good time with it. And which I feel like you didn't have to. It's definitely gotten more complicated than it used to be. Like I remember just seeing yeah, I go into a store, I see a GameCube, I want the GameCube. The GameCube looks cool, and I didn't think about, man, I wish we had a GameCube Pro halfway through this generation, because man, the performance is, oh wow, my light just died on me. But I didn't have to think about, wow, I wish we had better performance. And granted, games from older console generations, they targeted 60 a lot of the time. So you didn't have, I mean, of course, not every game was running at 60 FPS, but more games were running often than not at 60 FPS. So you didn't have to worry about, oh man, the performance isn't that great on this game. I wish we had a pro version right now. Whereas now you are sort of expecting, okay, now the games actually need a pro version because they're not doing that well. And I find that to be just completely baffling how it sort of devolved. And it's something that I've mentioned in a video that I made discussing this, is the fact that it used to also be that the prices for consoles and everything else got cheaper as we got into a generation. Like, if you bought a PS2 like halfway through the generation, it was cheaper than it was at launch. If you bought, like an Xbox or an Xbox 360, if you bought a PS3, definitely a PS3, because you mentioned this before, was how we mentioned, and you discussed this with the when the PS5 Slim was announced, was that the PS Slim, I believe, was cheaper, or was like relatively priced with the original or at least they weren't. I can't remember the exact words you said, but it was essentially that that the older PS Slim models were reasonably priced, and they weren't, really expensive, all things considered, and also that the base model also was cheaper as well because they, we have the newer model, we're gonna make the original version cheaper. Essentially, and this is also sort of what I wanted to mention with the refurbished things, is that the refurbished models that they're selling is essentially the only discount you're getting. And I honestly feel like they put out the refurbished models discounted as a bit of damage control over the reaction that people had over the PS5 Pro being announced, because they didn't announce that the refurbished PS5 models were going to be coming until after the PS5 Pro video was released, and of course after people expressed that they weren't happy with the price for the PS5. So I feel like that on one hand is a bit of damage control. I mean, sure, it does get people a way to get a PS5 at a discounted price, but it's still, at the end of the day, not a brand new console. So I definitely agree. I think that I definitely, that's another reason why I'm not too fond of what they've done on that end. But yeah, definitely the pricing issue is crazy. Like, also the fact that this is halfway in the gen and we're probably about 50% more expensive than we were at the start of the generation. That has never happened before. We've never gone halfway through a console generation and then had to spend 50% more for a revamped model. That definitely is ridiculous. But one thing also additionally that was mentioned during the video was the fact that Mark saw a potential for the PS5 Pro to have a range of performance modes. And when I heard that, I thought, you are so close to getting what we've been saying for years that console should have. And it's this small thing that PC gamers do when they go into a game. It's called system settings, and they get to modify how the game operates. And because of that, they can prioritize one thing over another. Do they want the textures to be improved? Do they want the anti-aliasing to be adjusted? Do they want the shadows to change? Do they want to have ray tracing or no ray tracing? Do they want to change the actual resolution? They can do those things on a PC. And I feel like they're so close now to actually getting that's what we've saying that console should have, that it's they just miss it. And so I also wonder now, because of that, all these things that console fanboys have been saying about PC, they're slowly getting those things and still talking about the PC. And I mean, the only difference now essentially is the fact that they're using a very locked down operating system, so they can't really do much else besides play games. But at this point, consoles are definitely just a stripped down PC. They're using PC parts. They're able to, do all these things that are available on PC, but now they're trying to get system settings under the guise of performance modes, but they're saying they want PC capabilities, but they just don't know it. So I definitely feel like eventually they should just get to the point where they actually have system settings in games. Like, imagine being able to pop in your game. And also, that's something that would be a huge benefit to the base PS5 mode, because imagine if someone doesn't want all the stuff but can possibly get 60 FPS in a game without having to, adjust all these, without having to, say, buy a PS5 Pro. Say, all right, I'm willing to sacrifice some settings here and there just so I can get 60 FPS. It might not be the prettiest thing here. It might not have all these different features, as graphical features, but I can possibly hit 60 FPS, and that's good enough for me. Like, if you could, imagine how essentially you could even possibly extend the life of a console by doing that thing. Like, that's why some people with older graphics cards and older PC builds are able to extend what they do, because they can adjust these settings to, like, even if they don't necessarily get what they want or what they find is ideal, they could possibly find a way to balance things out where they're content with what they're getting performance-wise. So I definitely think that that's something that maybe eventually consoles will get down the line. But I definitely do find one thing which was really laughable is, again, talking about 4K, like, as being a targeted 4K 60 FPS. And I'm like, please stop saying that. I mean, I remember, and I actually had to confirm with a friend because I asked him about this the other day. I said to him, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't the PS4 mentioned as being a 4K console? And he said, yeah, they'd say something about 4K. I'm like, okay, that was a lie, wasn't that? And then,
well, I think it was just the PS4 Pro that was 4K.
Okay. So the PS4 Pro, and then the PS5, talking about 4K and not always getting 4K, and now the PS5 Pro. I'm like, stop playing this game. Go shoot for something that's reasonable. Like, if you said 1440p 60 FPS, I would say, I feel like that's more manageable. I feel like that's a pretty reasonable goal to obtain, because it's something where you could get some good textures, get some good quality shadows and stuff, and not have to worry about pushing things too hard to like achieve 4K, and you can probably still hit 60 FPS. But please stop doing 4K. 4K is so overkill, and I'm really tired of hearing 4K because, for one thing, I mean, they even mentioned it, it's not going to be possible for every game. So why not shoot for something that most games can actually run, most games can actually hit? And I even mentioned this before, like, if they originally said we're gonna target 1080p 60 FPS for the PS5, I'd say that actually is a very reasonable thing. I think that's very reasonable that the PS5 can do that for most games, nearly every game. So if they said that, I would actually applaud Sony for doing a consistent 1080p 60 FPS rather than doing a very inconsistent 4K 60. Because I think having consistency is much better than having rare performance highs. But yeah, the PS5 Pro definitely is not something that I will buy. Granted, I didn't buy a PS5 anyway, but any game that comes out, I could definitely just wait. I have no problem with waiting. I like you said, the games will come by. Definitely plenty of games that are already on PC that's definitely my backlog, at least, that I haven't touched yet. So I can definitely wait for that. But I don't know what Sony's doing there with that. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that I have to say on that end.
I'm calling it now. I think the PlayStation 6, they are going to basically start giving people the options of system settings, and they're going to brand it as something like totally unique and brand new, like Apple does, where they'll take a feature that's existed on Android or PC for literally like 5 years, and they'll rebrand it to make it seem like it's something new and original to them, and the fanboys are going to defend it. Now, I do think that what's going to happen is it's probably going to be like they'll have the default modes of performance and fidelity, but then they'll also say, and now, as a brand new feature for PlayStation, you will have the ability to modify the settings as you see fit if you want to get more performance or better visuals, and you can balance it out however you want. And of course, then you'll have fanboys in particular will be praising Sony for their brand new, unique way of doing things. And Yeah, but I think that's what's going to happen with the PlayStation 6. I think that's going to be their default, at least with first-party games. I think that's what's going to happen. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's really all I have to say on that matter. I feel like we've beaten this topic to death quite a bit. But yeah. Anything else?
No, sir. No, sir. But I definitely will put that memo in the back of my mind. And you did call the $700 price tag, so I'll definitely keep that in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm not the only person who called it, but I just figured, based on what we'd been seeing from Sony, that $700 made the most sense that they would be doing that. So, all right, well, let's go into our recommendations and dissuasions. Start us off.
All right, so my recommendation is going to be to vote with your wallet. So if there's something in a game or just a company in general that you are not fond of, definitely, I would say if you do want them to make some sort of change, hold off from buying said game from them. Because you definitely can make a difference. I mean, we've definitely seen this lately, and some people said it doesn't make much of a difference, but you definitely can make a difference. I mean, look at what happened with Helldivers 2, how that, changed things there. Look at what happened, what was the other game? What recently with like a Concord, how that game, that game got yanked pretty quickly. You can definitely make a change, and so don't think that, oh man, it doesn't make a difference. It definitely can make a difference. And if you feel like you do necessarily want to get a game, or maybe even like a certain platform, like maybe a console, but you're like, I don't want to support a company, you can do something like buy a used copy of the game, buy a used system, or if you're even on PC, buy a game from a gray market site. That way you don't actually have to, not necessarily supporting the devs, but you are actually paying for your copy of the game, whether it's physical or digital. So I would definitely say don't just feel like you can't make a difference. Vote with your wallet, and push back how you can.
All right, good recommendation. So I have multiple recommendations this week, one of which was one that I meant to recommend last week and I just forgot about until after we had already finished recording. So there's this fantastic YouTube channel called Squareface, and he does he plays a variety of different Souls-like games, and I've watched at least a decent chunk of his Dark Souls remastered playthrough, and this guy's hilarious. I mean, and it's highly edited, of course, very meme heavy, but it's just like, oh man, hilarious, absolutely. If you are looking for something entertaining to watch, especially if you've played Dark Souls and like you understand all the bosses and the frustrations of dealing with different kinds of enemies and everything, Squareface, well worth checking out. Definitely check out his stuff. So then additionally, I also want to recommend, this is more of a specific situation if you're having this. So, of course, as we know, Joy-Cons have issues. They'll have problems with the sticks, they'll have problems with connectivity, things like that. I've had issues with most of my Joy-Cons for a while. Basically, the only ones that I haven't had issues with are the ones that came with my Switch OLED. But I had two sets of Joy-Cons that I got at launch. The gray ones, which came with the Switch, and then the red and blue ones, which I bought, separately. And then also my Skyward Sword official Joy-Cons that I bought when Skyward Sword HD came to the Switch. And all of them were having issues with connectivity. So my recommendation is, if you are having issues with your Joy-Cons, send them into Nintendo for repair, because they do not charge you for it. Anytime they have to fix the Joy-Cons, they do it for free, because they know it's a problem with the hardware itself. But especially because if they can't fix it, they will replace them. and I'm pretty much positive that all 3 sets of Joy-Cons I sent in are brand new, the ones that they sent me. They didn't fix them, they just replaced them, because they're cleaner than they were before, but they're like clean to the point where it's like, this looks like it's brand new. And it's possible that they fixed it and that they know how to clean it properly, but like, these things look brand new. I haven't even tried using them yet. Probably do some Mario Party over the weekend with the kids, but yeah. So yes, send in your Joy-Cons to get repaired. It can take a little bit, a week or two. I think it took about 2 weeks from the time I sent them to the time I got them back. But it's totally worth it, especially because if they replace them, it's like, shoot, you get brand new ones without having to pay anything for it. It's great. So,
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, just have a quick question. So, was there any sort of like window period as far as like how long before you could send them in, or like a deadline?
Well, there is, but I think it's a pretty generous deadline from the time that you set up the repair, because I think it took I set up the repair and it took me at least 2 or 3 weeks before I finally got around to sending them in. May have even been as much as a month. They give you quite a bit of room in which to send them, so
Okay.
very helpful. And I mean, hopefully everything will be working properly. I'm assuming that they will be, because I don't think they would have sent them back if they weren't functional. And they've had a pretty good track record for me when it comes to that. So I think all the other times that I've sent in Joy-Cons to get repaired, they've just repaired them. But I'm pretty sure this time they just straight up replaced all of them. So, and then I do have 2 more recommendations. One is play Death Stranding. I'm gonna say it is totally worth it. Don't let the initial part of the game where the introduction of the game isn't always the best way to really give yourself an idea of what the gameplay is like, because it really just, they introduce different mechanics as you go, but it's done in such a way that it feels natural. As you gain new ability, or not abilities, but new gear and stuff that can help with traversal, help with carrying gear, etc. It's really a fantastic game, and it's so worth it. My last recommendation is Jedi Fallen Order. I haven't been overly impressed with many Star Wars games in a while, at least not this generation, but Jedi Fallen Order is really good, and I've heard that Jedi Survivor, at least once they fixed the performance issues, is even better. So that one's on my wish list as an eventual thing when it's cheap enough to make it worthwhile. But yeah, Jedi Fallen Order is really good. And one thing I didn't mention earlier when I was talking about the Steam Deck performance, for you it wouldn't be good enough, because I know you're more picky about it than I am. You can get a pretty consistent 45 frames per second with the medium settings and the epic textures, which is what I did. It's possible I could mess with it further and do some other things to upgrade it and still get the same performance, but at least for now, I'm pretty happy with how it looks and runs on the Steam Deck. So that's all I got for recommendations.
Nice.
Dissuasions.
My dissuasion is going to be, don't get the PS5 Pro, please. I feel like you could do so much more with that money. Yeah, just don't. Please don't. Buy a base PS5, and it won't be as good of performer, but you could save that money and get something else.
Yeah, for the price of a PS5 Pro, you can just buy a PS5 and buy 3-4 games, and you'd be good. Just buy a refurbished PS5 with the disc drive, and then buy some used games, and you're golden. You get a bunch of games, and it's instead of spending $800 for the PS5 Pro with the disc drive and the stand, and then still have to buy games and pay for online if you want to do that. So I agree with you.
You could get some Nintendo Switch lights for a whole family.
That's true. You could. Very, 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 very easily. All right. Well, actually, my dissuasion is exactly the same as yours. So I'm just going to second what you said. Don't buy the PS5 Pro. Don't waste your money on it. Just if you really want something that performs better than the PS5 and you don't want to do PC, just wait for the PS6. It's going to be probably a couple years, but like realistically, the PS5 is going to give you probably what you're looking for in general, and the PS5 Pro, I don't think it's going to fulfill the promises that it makes. I think it's just going to end up being, for the most part, you might get marginally better visuals and performance, but it's not going to be as much as you might think it is, because that's just the reality of buying consoles. So, all right. Anything else?
No, sir.
Well, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel, I am Xeracon, that's IAMXERACON, so youtube.com/@IamXeracon. I put out 2 videos this past week. The first one was the Gundam Breaker 4 Collector's Edition unboxing. I put that out last Thursday, and then earlier today, or Wednesday, since the video goes out on Friday, I put out a video discussing the PS5 Pro price, although that video is mainly focusing on the price, and I went to save the other stuff we talked about, like the actual performance and my thoughts on how much the PS5 is so close to wanting to be a PC as far as what it's capable of doing, and we're giving people the choice. I was saving that for discussion tonight, so you can watch that video today if you want to focus more so on prices and stuff like that. And yeah.
All right, good stuff. Yep, I did get to watch your Batman fascism video earlier today, and something that I thought of after I had watched it sometime later is those kinds of things they were saying about Batman and Dick Grayson. Sounds like confession through projection. Like this is the kind of stuff that they would want to do, or I mean, the fact that their minds go that direction.
Yeah.
That says a lot about them. So anyway, yes, I checked out both of those videos. Good stuff. You can find me on YouTube at the Frozen Gamer 87. That is my main gaming channel, and I haven't been putting anything up for a while because I've just been kind of taking an extended break. But I am currently working on both my comparison for the Persona 4 Golden between the Vita OLED, the Switch OLED, and the Steam Deck OLED. That one's going to take a bit longer to get done because I need to re-record some stuff. But in the meantime, as long as I can fit it in this weekend, which I think I should be able to, God willing, I'm going to be working on recording comparison between the Switch and Steam Deck for Outer Wilds. As that one is going to be much, much shorter because I can do a full day lasts 22 minutes. So it's like I can record both of those the same night, and then I should be able to get to work on that comparison. I don't know if it's going up this week. It might still be a little bit longer just because I'm not sure how much time I'll have to edit. But the fact that it should only be 22 minutes instead of significantly longer should make it a lot easier to get through the editing process. So we'll see how all that goes. Right now, things are still kind of up in the air. I do want to note I have, at least as of right now, I believe I finalized the date for my next 24-hour charity stream raising money for Stack Up, and that is going to be Friday, October 25th, beginning at 9 a.m. Central Time, and I'll be streaming for 24 hours on my Frozen Gamer 87 channel and raising money for a charity that helps veterans with mental health issues and provides them in many cases with video games to aid them in getting through things like PTSD and various other things related to military service. So It also helps connect them with other veterans, connects them with people who can that they can talk to and get therapy from, and it's just a really great charity. So um, I'm glad to be streaming for that for 24 hours for the third year in a row, and yeah, I'll keep adding details as they come up. Right now, I still have to do some setup. I'm probably going to be trying to do a dual PC stream setup so that way I can actually have one PC that's specifically devoted to the stream itself, and then have my main PC be focused on just playing the game, which should improve the quality of both. And also make it so that if I have to restart my PC, I don't have to shut down the stream in order to restart my PC. So that should help a lot as well. I also have a cooking channel on YouTube called Not Authentic But Delicious. That's youtube.com/@NABD Cooking. Once again, this is another one I've been taking a break from, but I do have several recipes recorded. It's just a matter of taking the time to get them edited so that they can start going up. I'm not sure on timing. I am hoping that I can maybe get one of them start getting those back up on starting this coming Wednesday of next week, so the 18th of September. That would be the goal, is to have my first of the next set of cooking videos going up and hopefully have a more regular cadence. Those ones don't take super long to edit. It's more the recording aspect that takes a while, and because I've been trying to take a break and it's just having the time to set aside for that kind of thing, I just haven't done it yet. So be looking forward to that. It's going to be lots of good stuff. Let's see here, what else is there? Of course, then there is our YouTube channel for the Orange Box Podcast. So that's youtube.com/@theorangeboxpodcast. If you are listening to the audio-only version, which is up on Google or YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, etc., that goes live at 12 a.m. Central Time every Friday. And the video version, as mentioned before, is on YouTube at the Orange Box Podcast. And there, if you want to watch the video version, it's not just an opportunity to see our beautiful faces, but also an opportunity to see gameplay from games we've been playing, also clips from various trailers and that sort of thing that go up throughout the week that we are discussing at the time. Even if that's not necessarily always the best reflection, because the download quality is not as high as the actual original trailer, such as with the PS5 Pro reveal, that definitely is nowhere near as good. But either way, it's just an opportunity to see all those things, and some people, they just like to have a little more than just listening to something. So, but all the features are going to be the same otherwise. You'll always have us talking for 2.5 hours every week, up to 2.5 hours in general, regardless of whether we get any comments, questions, etc. Of course, if you want to leave us any comments, if you have any questions for us, if you want to tell us to Persona 3 ourselves, you can go ahead and just you can contact us either by commenting on the video version of the podcast, or you can also email us, theorangeboxpodcast@gmail.com, or you can contact us through Twitter @theorangeboxpod. And even though I'm not active on there with it, if I see a message come through, I will certainly be checking it and I will get back to you. So, and of course, if you have any questions for us in general, then I will happily read them on the show and we can talk about it. So, no matter what, we're going to keep talking every week. This is a great opportunity for us to catch up from week to week, because this is where we really do most of our talking, and it's a great outlet just to talk about this hobby that we enjoy so much. So, I believe that's everything I got. Any final thoughts? Last chance.
No, sir.
Well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zeracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast, and until next time, make a burrito with ingredients you would not normally put into a burrito. Orange Box Podcast, out.